All right, hello and welcome back. We are going to continue progress on our leaf slab dish, plate, whatever you're going to make it into. So in my case, this slab that I pressed an actual leaf into has been drying for a couple of hours on a medium humidity day. And I've also got these little feet that I'm going to attach to the other dish that I had made. So I'm going to set some of these aside. How do I know that this is ready to move on? One of the ways that I know is if I pick up part of it, it kind of stays there now instead of flopping right back down. Okay, another way that I know is that I can actually touch the texture that's on the surface and it doesn't smush at all. I don't recommend testing it that way, but that's another way that you can tell that something is getting towards leather hard, but not quite leather hard. So this is the stage at which I would want to come up around my edges and just gently place my fingers underneath the edges and use my thumbs to just gently press, making a curling motion. See how this is now curling up just a little bit. And I'm gonna go all the way around all of my edges, gently, 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 giving it just this little bit of a curve. And what this will do is when it's used as a dish, I tend to use this as like a spoon rest. You know, if you are cooking something in a pan on your stovetop and you've got like your messy spoon or spatula and you don't want to set it down on the counter, you want to set it down on a spoon rest. So this could be used as a spoon rest, a trinket dish, or whatever you can think of that would be a good use. So I've got my edges all curled up now. Okay, if there's anything, I'm noticing that there's a little spot right here where there's an extra little chunk of clay and it's driving me crazy. The best time to actually mess with that is much later, because if I try to fix it now, I'm gonna make it a mess. But if I try to fix it later when it's a little bit harder, it actually won't make a mess at all. And it's really hard to wait when you're a beginning artist working in clay and you you just wanna fix it. Don't do it now, do it later. Ignore the piece, put it out of your view, check it later. Anyway, but now I've got my edges all tucked up. Let's say that you came to it a little bit too soon and it wasn't quite ready to stand up, but like you didn't think you'd have time to get to it before it got too dry, and you didn't want to bag it, and you didn't want to put it away, and you weren't sure when to do stuff. If you wanted to, you could take little pieces of clay and just stick them underneath so that it would have something to rest on, and that could hold it up in that position until it's dry. Another thing you could do is take a baby sponge and stick it under there, but here's the trick. If your sponge is wet or damp at all, it's actually going to make a problem rather than a solution, because it'll add moisture to your piece instead of supporting it as it dries. It'll end up taking a lot longer to dry. So that's just another consideration. So I'm gonna set this up, which now has my curved edges all around, to dry until leather hard. When it's leather hard, I can come back in and clean up my edges. You can see right now that my edges in some places are really kind of rough, and they definitely need to be smoothed. But you know what? If I try to do it now, I'm gonna make a mess of the piece instead of making it smoother. I do wanna wait until leather hard, hard leather hard, before I get into that. Okay, now I'm gonna come back to that little maybe sushi dish type of slab piece that I was making earlier. I did put it inside a plastic bag, and I actually sprayed it a couple of times with my little spray bottle full of water because it was getting a little bit dry. Okay, so I've already smoothed this one. This one is true leather hard. You can tell because I can hold it by one side and it's not flopping down at all. This is ready to hold its own form. I can, really shake it around and nothing's gonna happen. I've got my little small square rectangle slabs that I made earlier. And what I can do now is slip and score them. I have to grab my slip. To attach them, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip my piece over. Okay, and you know it's leather hard because nothing bad is happening. It's not starting to slump or anything. If your piece is starting to slump, stop, blow dry it or put it in front of a fan, or simply wait with it out in the air of the room for an hour and then check it again. Don't wait too long, because if you wait for a piece to get bone dry, you will no longer be able to make the attachment, no matter what pact you're trying to make with the universe for having pity on you. No matter whether you spray it down a ton, if you spray down a bone dry piece, it's actually going to make the piece disintegrate, which means fall apart. So what I'm going to do, I like these little feeties, and I could choose to do them a couple of different ways. One way that I could put them on is this kind of flattish way, which is I think what I'm going to go with. That just gives it a little bit of rise. Another option though would be to put them all on their side and have it stand up in this fashion. Well, one of them fell down, but I could do it this way. But since I did not bother to get out any sort of measuring tool while I was making them, they're not an even height, so that's not going to be a good plan for me. I now see where my ruler is, and I could have done that, but I didn't, so I'm not going to move forward that way. Okay, so I'm going to take them off, and what I like to do is to go ahead and take any sharp tool will work really well for this. I've got a fancy little scoring tool here that has a bunch of little blades on the surface. You could use that. You could use your needle tool. You could use, one of these. You could use a specific scoring tool. Anything that has a sharp, ridgy edge like this also would work. But there are two things you have to do. You have to slip it and you have to score it. You always want to put the slip on first. So this is my bucket of, I should say jar of clay and water mixed together to make slip. I made this just as the leftover slurry from when I was throwing on the potter's wheel. So you won't be able to make yours that way at home, unless you have a potter's wheel, but I don't think you do. What you can do instead is just break up a bunch of small pieces of clay, put them in a jar with a lot of water, and let them sit for a couple of days, and then get in there and just work them around really well, and it'll work perfectly well. That'll be slip. So I'm gonna take some slip on my finger, I'm gonna put it on the foot, I'm gonna score it. So what that means is I'm gonna scratch it all in one direction. Okay, so that's all scratched. And then I'm gonna take some more slip, put it on there, and I'm gonna scratch it all in the opposite direction, and then I'm gonna go diagonal. Okay, score it up really good. If it does not look kind of like raw hamburger meat, it is not scored. It is not simply scratching at one or two places. You're trying to realign and change the way that all of the little platelets, which are usually all in a row, all like this, in the clay, actually get like chaotically disrupted, and then we're gonna realign them. Okay, so I've got this, and I'm gonna just do that same thing to all four of them. So slip, then scoring. It's okay to overdo it. It's better to overdo than to underdo. Okay, slip, scratch one way, scratch the opposite way, then scratch diagonal. Okay, so I've got these all, and they are looking gooey and gross. That is good. Okay, now, how do I know where to scratch and do everything, make the attachment on my piece? Well, I'm gonna just try eyeballing it. I'm just dropping them on there really quick. Okay, so I've dropped them on there. Don't put them too close to the center, all of them, because then you'll make your piece kind of wobbly. But now I've just gently placed them there, and I can just mark out for myself using a sharp tool where they're gonna go. You could have also done this before if you were thinking ahead. Okay, and then I've marked them all out. I'm gonna take off the pieces. Okay, and you can see that I've just marked them out. Okay, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing to these sides. So you slip and score both sides. So I'm taking slip, and I'm gonna put it on all four. Be generous. Okay, and then I'm going to do one direction, Then I'm going to do the opposite direction. Okay, you can see that's where I'm at so far. And then, you know, I'm going to get a little more slip involved, and I'm going to do the diagonals. Okay, the reason that we put slip on it, I'm going to just add a little bit, just another dollop of slip. This is like Southern coleslaw. You don't stop with the mayonnaise. You just keep going until it's really gooey. Okay, so you're going to take your feet. Okay, so that's my first one. I'm going to just gently press it on. If there is not slip oozing out the edges like there is on this one, you did not use enough slip. Pull it off, slip and score it again, both sides, and add more slip. There is no point in moving forward if there is not slip oozing out the edges of your slip and score of a hard slab. You did not make an attachment, and it will fall off during firing. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of them. Okay, and I'm in luck because slip came oozing out the edges of all of them. It looks gooey. Okay, and this is the very satisfying part. I'm going to take a clean sponge, or if I preferred, I could take a paintbrush, and I'm going to just go around my edges and just clean up the extra slip and smooth out the edges and just make everything look neat. If you have any marks from scoring like this that didn't actually end up aligning to the piece, just sponge it. Okay, you can see the progress that I've made on those two, and then the ones I haven't gotten to still look ooey gooey. If there's any roughness on the bottom that I don't like, this would be a great moment to smooth it out. Just smoothing the whole thing with, notice my brush, my movements are very broad and they're going down the whole way. I'm not making a bunch of little movements, which will make a bunch of little marks. I'm making one flow. And by controlling the way that I move, there was a little piece of clay stuck on there. That's gonna make the difference between a piece that's gonna look like a beginner and a piece that's gonna look a bit more experienced and advanced. It's like the difference, I think, between a beginner and someone who's been doing it for a long time is that the person who's been doing it for a long time touches their piece fewer times than someone who's beginning, because you recognize the motion that must happen and you think about where it needs to go, and then you just stop touching it before it gets kind of messed with or ends up looking like worked over. Okay, so this is the bottom of my piece now. It's looking nice and smooth. Okay, now comes the real test. Make sure that you have a clean area. Like, you don't want there to be any little pieces of clay that are dry anywhere, but you don't really want it to be wet either. Mistakes were made. So then you'll take your plate and then set it down on your table and just lightly make sure that, in fact, your feet all make contact so that you don't have a rocky plate. So I'm just gently pushing down on them, and now it's nice and flat. That did make the edges of them somewhat sharp again. When this is almost bone dry and these have set up quite a bit, I can come around the edges one last time with a clean small sponge and make them smooth again. The only thing that this is missing at this time is your name. So you can go ahead and take any sharp tool, but it would probably want to be a clean one. Miss Bolin, you do not have any clean tools. There we go. You can just take anything sharp like this, or honestly, you could take a pencil. You could take, I've got a little tool here that has a rubber tip. What do I want to use? I'm going to use something that looks just like a pencil. This is just a little stylus. You can use just like a pencil, like a normal pencil. And you're gonna go ahead and just write your name in the middle. Okay, you'll notice that where I signed my name, there are some little chunky balls of clay that have come up on the edges. Knowing when to fix something is key to being a good potter. Fix that when it's bone dry. They will all just fall off beautifully. You run the sponge over it one time and it'll look perfectly clean. So now I'm gonna leave this out in the air to fully dry. All right, and that is the end of that. For how I'm going to choose to address finishing this guy, I could choose to put feet on it or not, but what I am going to do is the same thing that I did with the edges of my sushi dish. I'm gonna run the sponge around it. I'm going to make sure that it looks really smooth. I'm gonna pop off that tiny little guy. See, I'm already messing it up. Gotta do it later when it's drier. And I'm gonna put my full name on the bottom of it. The reason that you're not going to put your initials on it and put, in fact, your whole name on it is because at Yorktown High School, we have over 200 and some odd students, and the chances of you having the same initials as a student who's in one of my colleagues' classes are significant. So please do me a favor and do yourself a favor if you ever want to see your piece again. Put your whole name on there. And then you can let those dry up. And I'll have another video about how to keep your pieces safe from your pets and siblings, yourself, if you're clumsy like I am. And I'll talk about that again. All right, happy potting.